Welcome to Free Sailing Tutorials. Today we're going to look at how you can undertake a thorough but simple daily engine check on your boat. In this short tutorial, you'll be learning how to undertake a quick, simple and thorough daily engine check for your marine diesel engine. First of all, no engine check would be complete without a pithy mnemonic, so here's one for you. I wobbled you. I isolate the engine battery. This is important for two reasons. Firstly, it prevents the engine from being started while you're working on it, which would not be a great idea. And secondly, you are removing the risk of shorting the engine accidentally whilst working on it, perhaps with metal tools, or if you happen to be into the whole Magnum PI metal necklace or whatever, then it wouldn't be a good idea to be working on an engine with that around your neck. If it shorts, it's going to give you a very nasty burn or worse. So with that little bit of style or sartorial advice thrown in for free, let's look at, after isolate, what we do next. So first of all, let's check for water. Check the coolant level and also check the raw water, that's the seawater strainer. So if you top up the coolant, make sure that you add the appropriate amount of antifreeze or anti-corrosion fluid. And if you open the seawater strainer to inspect the gauze strainer and the basket, make sure to close the seacock first, or you might find that the seawater in the system will just dump into the sea, and then you've created an airlock, which you would need to rectify later by filling up from a kettle or whatever. Make sure when you finish that, you check that the seacock is open again, otherwise you're going to end up overheating your engine with no water cooling. So once you've checked for any blockages in the raw water seawater system, and also to make sure that your coolant is at the appropriate level, making sure not to overfill any expansion tank if you're filling through an expansion tank, go on to O. O is for oil. Check the oil level. Remember that too much oil can be as damaging as too little. So make sure you get the right amount of oil in the engine, and if you are going to refill, don't overfill. Do it small amounts at a time. Be careful not to drip oil on the floor when you're checking, because it will quickly become a hazard, especially when the floor is wet. Second, B for belts. Check the tension of the alternator belt. In simple terms, it should be firm, but you should be able to twist the belt between your thumb and forefinger through about 90 degrees. Also, inspect the belt for chafe and deterioration. The next B is bilges. Check the engine bilge. Is there oil, coolant, water, or fuel in the engine bilge? Is there more than before? If so, why? Don't just clear the bilges. Start an investigation if that's the case. And whilst you're at it, check the other bilges and clear them as necessary. And remember, if you've bilges that have oil or fuel in them, then you must dispose of the water responsibly. Most marinas have facilities for that. L, leaks. Check the telltale signs of leaks in rubber pipes and fuel lines. This is normally, you'll see a residue of spray from lines or fuel that's leaking through a bad connection or a split pipe. Specifically, check around the filters, the injectors and jubilee clips. Then E for electric. So check the domestic battery charge. You should also check the engine battery, but of course while you're isolated it's unlikely that your system is set up so that you can check that. So you must remember to check engine battery charge voltage once you have finished the engine check. Next is D for diesel. Check the diesel levels. Intermittently check the tanks also by a visual inspection to make sure you have no bugs in the fuel. If you've got a rake or filter, then put a torch up against the glass to check that the fuel is not contaminated. And if there is silt, then remove the silt and monitor and manage the fuel to make sure that you're not introducing contaminated fuel into your system. And then U is unisolate the engine battery. At that point, remember to check the battery charge to make sure it's holding charge and it is properly charged. And I would also say remember that all vessels are different. You should always follow the instructions set out in your own engine's manual, but in most cases, that simple mnemonic of I wobbled U will get you through a simple, quick engine check, which is going to make sure you've got a much better chance that the engine will be in good condition and will work when you need it. In conclusion, it's worth reminding you of a few basics. One, be sure to inform people when you're doing an engine check that you are doing an engine check so they don't accidentally start the engine and hurt you. Two, after the check, make sure you leave the engine as you found it and make sure the engine seacock is open if you're going to sea and will be needing the engine. Three, remember to carry an appropriate number of engine spares such as fuel and oil filters, belts, tools, spare oil, etc. And keep an inventory and update it as necessary. Four, always carry a few basics with you. I would always carry insulation tape, some duct tape or gaffer tape, self-amalgamating tape, twine, kitchen roll, WD-40, 3-in-1 oil, a mole wrench, probably 2, some Allen keys, a couple of adjustable spanners, and a selection of screwdrivers as a bare minimum. And then probably a voltmeter, a selection of rubber Jubilee clips, hacksaw and spare blades, and some clean rags. And that really would be a minimum for going to sea, even on day sailing, so that you can, when necessary, do the rudimentary things you need to do. Also carry a couple of empty containers and a funnel so that you can drain fuel and contaminated fuel into a container, because otherwise you can have a problem with where to put it. And then 5, as part of your periodic checks, you should also check the deck. You'll be checking blocks and cleats and safety rails, jack stays, and pretty much everything that you use, the clutches, the jammers, the connection from the boom through to the mast, the gooseneck, and also checking where the rigging goes into the deck and checking the swages for rust or for corrosion. The swages connecting the rig itself to the deck, and all swage connections. And then from time to time you should be going up the rig. Make sure you do it safely with help, and always use 2 halyards. And when you go up the rig, you should be checking the blocks and pulleys at the top, and also all the items that are on the mast itself, and the rigging and the bulbs and lights and navigation lights on your tricolor, and all that sort of stuff. You take the opportunity to check the rig entirely. Then also not just the rig and the deck, but think about steering cables, and make sure that all the cables are in good order and that you haven't got corrosion or that they're too slack or too tight. And it's worth checking at that point the rudder and the rudder stock, the bearing, and making sure that there's no water ingress. And finally, if you'd like an easy to follow guide, click on the link below this video and you'll see that there's a way to register and just download the A4 guide for you and your crew to use. I hope that's of some use to you, and see you again soon.